Ay, contigo, muchacho. Es el deseo de estar contigo. Es el deseo que me provoca todas las noches cuando ya no estás conmigo. Conmigo, sentirme cerca de ti. Y ámame como soy. Tómame sin temor, solo te pido yo. Te pido, no me causes más dolor. Suave que me estás matando, que estás acabando, corazón.
Hold up a mirror to the city of Los Angeles and what is reflected? A place where innovation thrives, where opportunity abounds and intellect expands, where creativity produces new visions, where compassion heals, where science and technology drive progress. Hold up a mirror to the city and what is reflected? A place that embraces all people, where we transform lives with each step up the ladder of prosperity, where we energize communities, where we reinvigorate our region and shape the future of our city, our state, and our nation. Hold up a mirror to the city and what do you see? Cal State LA. We are LA. Join us as we soar to greater heights. Cal State LA ranked #1 in the nation for upward mobility.
Welcome to the California State University, Los Angeles commencement ceremony for the College of Engineering, Computer Science, and Technology. Will the class of 2021 please rise to be acknowledged by your family and friends? Now, will everyone please rise for the national anthem? Please turn your attention to the screen. The national anthem will be performed by the Cal State LA Graduate Choral Ensemble and will be conducted by Melissa Aguilar Gray.
So proudly we
Please be seated. Now, please welcome to the stage the President of California State University, Los Angeles, William A. Covino.
Good morning. Congratulations, class of 2021. Here you are, looking good. I haven't seen you for a while. Where have you been? Yeah. Oh, it's great to see you all here back home here on campus and celebrating a great moment for all of us. I also want to welcome and acknowledge the Dean of your college, Emily Allen, and the Dean of the library, which is going to be opening again soon, Carlos Rodriguez. They're seated back there. There's Emily. And I also want you to notice the folks that you've been seeing around wearing white hats. You know, it's taken dozens and dozens and dozens of very dedicated people, days and weeks and months, to get us to this point and to make this event possible in the face of all the challenges that are surrounding it. And they've worked very, very hard. These are, faculty, staff, students, administrators, and volunteers. Worked very hard, really diligently, here every day, and here for days before, helping us to get things organized and making sure all the moving parts are moving. So I think that they're special folks for us today, too, and they've sort of guided you to this point and to your places, and are watching out to see that it all goes well, and are very, very, very focused on your success and your accomplishment. So for all the folks in the white hats, thank you very much. But, this is your day, right? This is the day to celebrate all that you've accomplished and all that lies ahead for you. I also want to acknowledge those graduates who couldn't make it here today for this ceremony, but who are watching via live stream. Wherever you are in the world right now, you are a part of this celebration as well, and we congratulate you. We all recognize, I hope, that earning a Cal State LA degree is a life-changing achievement. With that degree comes a unique identity. For one thing, you are a university graduate, and it's, the last statistic that I saw pegged university graduates at about 7% of the world population. So that is a unique identity. But an even more unique identity, an even more thrilling identity, is that you are forever a Cal State LA Golden Eagle. That's yours to keep. And we know that Golden Eagles have significant traits as well. Our mascot certainly represents bravery and is tenacious and resourceful and innovative and resilient. And the Cal State LA Golden Eagles graduating today, in addition to those traits, are also people who understand the value of service to others and see that as probably the best end goal to all of their efforts. You certainly stepped up during the pandemic. You illustrated what it means to be a Golden Eagle. Life changed very quickly, and you were forced to adapt, and you did. It wasn't easy. So I speak for faculty, staff, alumni, administrators, community members when I say we are all really just overwhelmed by your achievement under these circumstances at this point in time. It is really extraordinary, and you are that much more extraordinary for having achieved it. We're very, very proud of you. You didn't give up on your dream of earning a university degree. You continued studying, you continued learning, you continued serving others, you continued to care for your families and to strive toward your goals in spite of every challenge that the pandemic and other allied factors threw at us. Even as the world at times seemed to fall apart, you stayed together and worked to build a better world. And that's the phrase, I think, that defines a Cal State LA Golden Eagle most accurately. The focus on building a better world. That's certainly what your college is dedicated to, and what your academic departments and faculty are dedicated to through their research and teaching, and what you have adopted as your own dedication. That focus on building a better world allows us to see beyond some of the conflicts and infighting and politics and in difficult conditions that those around us would say are eternal and intractable and are just, the way it is. That's not the case, of course. And you're the folks who can change those circumstances. It is not the case that homelessness and injustice and inequity and disease will be with us forever, and we're going to have to work to make it true that we emerge as a world that is dedicated to social justice and dedicated to the public good. That's your job, but that's the job you've been trained to do, and that's the job that you can do so very well through your own innovation and your own dedication and the skills and knowledge that you bring to the table. Golden Eagles are a force for good, and they are a force for good in a world that desperately needs goodness. You are uniquely equipped to serve and lift up your communities. And I would propose that you have superpowers. Superpowers. I mean, think of it. Caring for one another is something that is in the DNA of a Cal State LA Golden Eagle. Caring for one another is a superpower. Compassion in the face of suffering is your superpower. And of course, surrounding all that, the knowledge and skill that will allow you and compel you to make a difference in the world is a superpower. So Marvel has the Avengers, I get it, but we have you, the Golden Eagles. You are the superheroes that our world needs now. Now, every superhero has an origin story. Where did that superhero come from? Well, your origin story is seated all around you. Family and friends, loved ones, mentors, partners, those who have made this possible for you and complemented your efforts, who kept you going when times were tough, who kept you believing in yourself and in your dreams and visions and capacity for achieving, and who sacrificed so that you could achieve. I'm going to pause for the flyover here. we get a few of those through our commencement ceremonies, and I'm sure they're going somewhere important, so I forgive them for the disruption. But so this is your moment, Golden Eagles, but it is also a moment that belongs to those whose love and support helped you achieve this goal. So in that spirit, I would like to ask all of the parents of our graduates to please stand and let us thank you, all of the parents. And you remain standing, and we'll add the grandparents, the grandmothers and grandfathers, if you would also stand and let us congratulate you. And how about the aunts and uncles, and the sisters and brothers, and the nieces and nephews, and the spouses and partners and children, and all the friends of the class of 2021. Everybody up. Thank you. Thank you so very much. You have helped make this day possible, and we appreciate it. We really do. That's a lot of help, right? That's great. The class of 2021 also includes a number of military veterans who've served our nation with valor and then returned to earn a Cal State LA degree. And I should add in that connection that for the last few months, starting in February, we had a COVID-19 vaccination mega site here at Cal State LA. And that was staffed almost entirely by active service and reserve military personnel. And it is those folks in uniform that helped us to administer 500,000 doses of COVID vaccine to you and your families and the community. So, you know, that is certainly a life-saving effort, and we're very grateful for it, and grateful for all that our military does to try to make the world that better place that I was talking with you about. In that connection, I'd like to ask anyone here among our graduates who is a veteran, and anyone in the house who is a veteran, to please stand and let us thank you. Any veterans in, there we go. There they are. Thank you very much. Thank you for your service. Well, big day, right? Big chapter in your life. And now you get to write the rest of the chapters of your life. And I hope that you will, as you do so, never forget the faculty and staff and fellow students who were part of your journey here at Cal State LA, that you'll never forget the academic lessons and the life lessons that you've learned during your time here, and that you will never forget that you hold those superpowers within you, and you're ready to go with bravery and tenacity and expertise that will make the world a better place. No one can take that power away from you. It will serve you well in the years ahead. So wherever you go in life, remember that you are a golden eagle, and you will soar. Congratulations.
The university grants the baccalaureate degree with Latin designations summa cum laude, magna cum laude, or cum laude to students who maintain an outstanding academic record while earning their degrees. These students wear gold braids draped on their black gowns to mark their outstanding academic accomplishments. Will the candidates for graduation with honors please rise and be recognized? Please be seated. We will now present graduates of the College of Engineering, Computer Science, and Technology. They have met all of the requirements for their respective degrees and are recommended by the university faculty who taught them. We invite master's degree graduates to the stage to be presented. With a Master of Science in Civil Engineering, Tommy Y. Kit Cam.
MD Musfikur Rahman.
Eduardo Lopez.
With a Master of Science in Computer Science, Veronica Torres.
Sudarshan N. Gutula.
Erica Estrada Denise Medina.
Ashana Deepak Purohit.
With a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering, Christopher Serrato.
Nelson Mauricio Flores.
Francisco Javier Lopez.
Sheila Shala Ahurayan.
John Michael Tamkin Jr.
Fuad Mohammed Bashir.
Caress Denaire David.
Sahar Maheri Desar.
Ashutosh Kumar.
Emmanuel Mina Rosella.
James Andrew Velasco.
Stephen Edwin Dove.
Ronak Mehboob Makani.
Kritika Balamurugan.
With a Master of Science in Industrial Management, Nicole Nedelcu.
Angel Ricardo Montejo.
Viridiana Hernandez.
Yogan Narayan Nikam.
Juan Pablo Escamilla.
Araceli Lopez.
With a Master of Science in Material Science and Engineering, Patricia Liliana Baron.
Mireille Uzunian.
Akshay Kumar Reddy Palagani.
With a Master of Science in Mechanical Engineering, Andrew Anthony Lopez.
Edgar Alexander Marroquin.
Andy Jose Hernandez.
William Alexander Gonzaga.
Congratulations. We invite bachelor's degree graduates to the stage to be presented. With the Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering, Matthew Malibashian.
Kevin Alexis Rodriguez.
Kevin Nicolas Ramos.
Valente Marcelino Rodriguez Luna.
Héctor Alcides Menéndez.
Carelli Dorado.
Roberto Benavides Molina.
Brandon Andrew Torres.
Leslie Noemí Martínez Hernández.
Alan Galvan.
Jacob Richard Martinez.
Christian Daniel Calvo.
Steven Ruben Medina.
Cassandra Liu.
David James Corona.
Stephen James Wong.
Saúl Cortés Jr.
Marcos Siutun Mui.
Luis Alberto Sosa.
Alan Bernard Cabanillas.
Abraham Tadrus.
Ruman Mafuz Kibria.
Hector Sepúlveda.
Carlos Manuel Perla.
Benny G. Ho.
Alejandra Carolina de Rio.
Jasmine Diane Lopez.
Anthony Trujillo.
Emanuel de Jesús López Villa.
Edward Mendoza.
Obed Isaí Coy.
Katie Macias.
David Vo.
Oscar Martinez Avillar.
Amilcar Joseph Castillo.
Ryan Trailer.
Freddy Francisco Quijada.
Alexandra Bernice Molina.
Sumia Puvada.
Joshua Manuel Gutierrez.
Cristina Sanchez.
Argin Nazari.
José Manuel Velázquez.
Alexander Vallejo.
Brian D. Aguilar Mendoza.
Héctor Armando Linares.
With a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, Jennifer Elaine Rivello.
Jenna Nikhil Ramirez.
Robert Engler.
Omar Alejandro Jarquin.
Joel William Cook.
Shant Rafi Habanjan.
Catalina Lorenza Lee.
Moises Alexander Perez Velasquez.
Christopher Williams Martinez.
Jonathan Leonel Caravantes.
Ezequiel Lucen. Rosa Teresa Cortés Mejía.
Christopher Omar Escobar.
Jason Alexander Negrete.
Ángel Iván Toribio.
Maya Jordan Horry.
Brittany Lam Tran.
Jacqueline Jamie Rader.
Gary Tu.
Abdullah Adwan Al-Shamari.
Hussam Saeed Al-Zaharani.
Claudio Alberto Sánchez.
Orifiel Santiago Ortiz.
Eric León.
Alfonso Mares.
Aaron Isaiah Corona.
Luis Lopez Hernandez.
Christopher Andrew Penilla.
Edwin Lopez.
Peter Daniel De Leon Tabanjan.
Sin San Chen.
Young Jae Lee.
Adriana Barba.
Colvier Bainig.
Pak Kong Poon.
Ariana Marie Fatahi.
Aldrin Enriquez Pacquiao.
Juan Martín Estrada.
Francisco Javier Padilla.
Cesar Chavez.
Pei Wei Yu.
Lázaro Cano Hernández.
Alan Leenan.
Hugo Manuel Montanez.
Miguel Pichardo.
Edward M. Romer.
Anthony Quang Tran.
Christopher Molina.
Victor Ramirez Navarro.
Manuel Gómez Ibarra.
Enoch Dankwa Asare.
Miguel Cano.
Lester Oman Arauz.
Christopher Robin Reza Nakonechny.
Fatima Valdez.
James Allen Cook II.
Alan Sosa.
Justin Tai.
Enrique Aviar.
Jairo Santos Martínez Morales.
Wesley Allen Aquino.
César Cerda Solorio.
Helen Cedillos.
Adrian Hugo Gonzalez.
Miguel Eduardo Cervantes Jr.
Diego Monterroso.
Brian Javier Santiago.
Ethan Alexander Balancio.
Natalie Diaz.
Aldo Solis.
Wilkin Chan.
Giovanni Cabrera.
Isaac Aldape Torres.
Noemí Lucas.
Rafael Pérez.
Mohamed Jamil Shukr.
Abdul Mutaleb Hassan Kausarani.
Ricardo Chaparro Jerónimo.
Christian Alexander Velez.
Brianna Talamantes.
Evelyn Reina Cortez.
David Matthew Arellano.
Patrick Cho.
Francisco Javier Calva.
Héctor Coronel Aispuro.
Brian Angel Torres.
Alan Steven Hernandez.
Hernán Reyes Juárez.
Louis Anthony Carlin.
Saúl Alreciza.
Faisal Aldosari.
Marisa Ana María Muñoz.
Mayra Estefany Izquierdo Montoya.
Gina Llama.
Bul Amodamin Q Tabet.
With a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering,
Talal bin Jubail.
Pedro Villa.
Akbar Rizvi.
David Emmanuel Hernandez.
Gonzalo Abraham Urias.
Gabriel Allen Zepeda.
Alejandro Martinez Mendoza.
Oscar Guzman.
Christopher Pineda.
Budrick Mateo Castillo.
Jessica Velasquez.
Alex Antonio Rodriguez.
Eric Alfredo Rojas Torres.
Jose Fabian Rea.
Summer Saline Tirado.
Miguel Ángel Gopar.
Henry Chow.
Juan Junior Avila.
Ye Ni Aung.
Dominique Valdez.
Jose Manuel Martinez.
Christian Eduardo Garcia Palacios.
Michael Carvajal.
Alexis Vargas.
Jeffrey Manuel Espinosa.
Stephen Vu.
Irvin Martinez.
Reynaldo Aguirre Jr.
Salvador Zambrano Jr.
Devin Cordero.
Justin Vergara.
Christian Antonio Flores Jr.
Kimberly Guido.
Natalie Shalini Dio.
Francisco David Tiquiram Garcia.
Isau Ariel Martinez.
Anthony Nguyen.
Frank Moreno.
Brian Daniel Castillo.
Christopher Moses Barrios.
William Gustavo Portillo.
Arnuvio Alexis Hernandez Carcamo.
Derek Castañeda.
Wyatt Luong.
Kenny Kin Bai Chung.
Alex Maxwell.
Isidro Fabian Honorato.
Sigifredo Antonio Aguilar.
Jason Arce Chien.
Felix Rod Abel.
Anthony Mario Castillo.
Manuel Alberto Rodriguez.
Jonathan Alexander Monroy Luongo.
With a Bachelor of Science in Aviation Administration, Nelson Cuellar Moreno.
Jerry Martinez.
Jay Ling Huang.
Shuk Fai Kong.
Kin Long Yip.
Rui Hong Liang.
Kozam Kozam.
Armin Harire Rostomian.
Anthony Mancias.
Antonio Cermeño Gonzalez.
Pablo Alexander Mejia.
Christopher Jason Cruz.
Jacqueline Iniguez.
Luis Enrique Briseño.
Javier Jarquin.
With a Bachelor of Science in Graphic Communication, Eric Martin Borgen.
Ethan Kenneth Del Cid.
George Anthony Fernandez.
Edwin A. Cabrera Carreto.
Stephanie Gutierrez.
Julio Pedro Juarez Jr.
With a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, Jose Fernando Lopez.
Kevin Benavente.
Abubakir Sidamed.
Pavit Singh Chawla.
Kevin Jonathan Crespin Ruiz.
Horacio Mondragon.
Jesus Alberto Garcia.
Jesus Brian Osuna.
Carlos Lario Solis.
Edward Hao Dong.
Brian Perez.
Rafael Mendoza.
Daniel Ramirez.
Carlos Alberto Mendoza Jr.
Heriberto Gonzalez.
Marlito Aban Refuerzo Jr.
Kong Song Tong.
Rawad Musa.
Lin Tien.
Edgar Ivan Hernandez.
Alan J. Atienza.
Freddie David Garcia.
David Fernando Melendez.
Monteg Marquis Lafrance.
Pierce Way.
Justin Lee Nim.
Javier Pedro Garcia.
Gerard Anthony Rosario.
Adrian Flores.
Jesus Andres Roman.
Kevin Diaz Lopez.
Kevin Anthony Aguilera.
Nicolas Ojeda Palacios.
Richard Steve Cruz Silva.
Beatriz Adriana Ruiz.
Sana Ruba Sheikh.
Gabriela Erika Cortés Mejia.
Kang Huang Lee.
Noah Elias Castro.
Manhon Chow.
Alden Lavaco Lalas.
Jonathan Chaz Warren.
Audelia Valdovinos.
Abraham Stephen Estrada.
Abraham Michael Flores.
Adrian Palomares.
Ricardo Medina.
Eris Kifong Tontat.
Thomas James Wetherell.
Jerome Nomfuente Pineda.
Jose Ramon Lopez.
Ashley Elizabeth Jetty.
Roman Alexander Arias.
Israel Lopez Diaz.
Christian A. Esqueda.
Kayleen Rose Ponce.
Christopher Ortega.
Johnny Lee.
Alexander Lopez.
Brandon Gonzalez.
Mark Tawfiq Kalaiji.
Joaquin Robles.
Phoebe Aradia Castaneda.
Brandon Pham.
Cassandra Marie Pahed.
Larry Gutierrez.
Jose Landa.
David Hermosillo.
Christopher Aaron Smallwood.
Alex Huang.
Evelyn Ramirez.
Leonardo Ramirez.
With a Bachelor of Science in Fire Protection Administration and Technology, Austin Blake Jackson.
Jesse Alejandro Lara.
Karime Martinez.
Luis Alberto Marquez.
Alberto Vital.
Jonathan Abel Gonzalez.
Lance Philip Jennings II.
Keone James Young.
Eric Juanosta.
Abraham Rashid Alzubey.
Jose Antonio Torres Jr.
Miguel Preciado.
Christopher Ortiz.
Uriel Lozano.
David Garcia.
César Lozada Castrejón.
Brian Cardona.
With a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Technology, David Reyes.
Cornelius Brown.
Eric Chen.
Marina Raylene Arieta.
Alejandra Salgado Valencia.
Ana Maria.
Lawrence Ortiz Nair.
Nidia Guadalupe Lopez.
Brendan Michael Galindo.
Martin Almaraz.
Carlos Eduardo Galdames.
Jorge Alberto Rodriguez.
Donovan Andrew Ayala.
Hector Armando Arroyo.
Manuel Garcia.
Edgar Perez Villanueva.
Eric Najera.
Sufi Asadi.
Ahmed Majari Asbe.
And last but not least, with a master's in electrical engineering, Sara Tabassum.
That was really good. You look great. There were a couple of small problems, so we're going to do it all one more time. No. Let's make this official. Will the master's degree graduates of engineering, computer science, and technology please rise for the conferral of your degree, the master's degree graduates? There they are. That's you. By the authority vested in me by the state of California and by the trustees of the California State University, I hereby confer upon you the master's degree for which you qualify with all the rights, privileges, and honors pertaining thereto. Congratulations. Or sit down for a minute, we'll get back to you. I want now to see the bachelor's degree graduates from the college. If you would all please rise. By the authority vested in me by the state of California and by the trustees of the California State University, I hereby confer upon you the baccalaureate degree for which you qualify with all the rights, privileges, and honors pertaining thereto. Now you can move your tassel from the right to the left. Congratulations. Okay, everybody up. There we are. Ladies and gentlemen, the class of 2021.
At this time, the university hymn will be performed by the Cal State LA Graduate Choral Ensemble, conducted by Chris Ornelas. Please turn your attention to the screen. Congratulations, graduates. This marks the end of your ceremony. Please follow the directions of university ushers as you leave the field and meet your guests. Thank you.